Welcome to Talking to Spirit with your host, James Van Prague.
Hello, everyone, and welcome again to Talking to Spirit, and thank you for sharing the space once again with me. Today, we have a very, very special show for you. I brought to you a man who's done a lot of work in life after death investigation, and he's one of the best in the field that I've ever met, I got to tell you. And I'm going to get right to it because Bob Olson is just came out with a new book called Answers About the Afterlife. And I read the book, and I did a blurb for the book, and it's probably the best, most in-depth book of any questions people have about life after death. So, Bob, are you with us?
I am, James. Thank you. I'm excited about being here. Thank you.
Thanks for being with us, Bob. And for people who don't know you, Bob, they should know you, Bob Olson. Bob Olson, you have several different websites, bestpsychicmediums.com, where you actually test mediums and psychics to be on that site, correct?
That's correct. And you have to be there.
Yeah, and then after many years of you finally finding me and testing me, I got on there. Thank you, God. And then afterlifetv.com. And Bob, and you just came out with a wonderful book, Answers About the Afterlife, which I've been waiting for years. Great, great book. And I just wanted to share it with all the listeners here. Tell us a little bit about your background, Bob. Where did you come from as far as how did you get interested in this? And tell us the beginnings.
You know, I was working as a private investigator. I had been a private investigator for years, and what happened was in 1997, my father died, and I was in my mid-30s. He died fairly young. He was 64, and this, even though I had experienced loved ones who had passed before that, for some reason, his passing made me question really what happens when we die. And
had you ever had any interest in this before your dad passed away? Ever questioned it, or were you a skeptic or a believer, or where did you stand on it?
You know, I didn't have any interest. I would think I was definitely a skeptic about all sorts of things that relate to, you know, what I've investigated now. I really, but it wasn't so much. I wasn't like one of those closed-minded skeptics. I had never seen any evidence to believe, and so I didn't believe, and and I'm still kind of that way until I experience something myself or see enough evidence to that's compelling enough for me to believe in it. I don't, and then I just don't believe in anything at all. So, you know, that's sort of.
And after your dad passed away, did he come to you in a sign, or did you have any? What was your first connection with him?
Well, you know, honestly, the first thing that happened that made me really wonder was while he was passing, me and my wife Melissa and my sister and my mother were holding his hand as he was taking his last breaths. And, of course, he was unconscious at the time. But he was definitely, you could hear all the monitors in the hospital, all the beeping was getting slower and slower and slower, and we could tell he was about to go. As this was happening, my mother sort of started sobbing, uncontrollably. And when she did, all the beeping started to rise again, as if he was coming back into his body, trying to hang on. And she recognized this, and she stopped herself, and she got control of herself. But then again, it happened. And two more times, every time she started sobbing again, all his vital signs ended up going up again. And that was my first clue, like, hey, something's going on here. That I'm not aware of, and that's really what made me curious about it.
And then after he actually passed, did you go seek a medium out, or did your dad come to you in some kind of signs? And how did that develop?
He came to me in a sign. The first thing, it was two main things that happened to me. The first thing was both myself and other family members started to smell the aroma of lilacs. And my father wasn't a big flower guy, but if there was one flower he liked, it was lilacs. And so we had planted lilacs near his grave, and so it was very prominent in our minds. And all of a sudden, windows closed, no lilac bushes around. We would smell the strong scent of lilacs. Or while I was driving down the road, the same thing would happen. And none of it had made any sense. And so we assumed, again, not having any experience in this field, but still assumed, that must be Dad saying hello. And I would acknowledge him. And then the only other thing that happened one time was, and this was soon after his passing, was my radio went nuts. And this is back in the late 90s. I had one of those old radios where you would turn the knob and the dial, the needle would go across,
Right.
and well, the needle started moving, and I wasn't moving it, and it was going from station to station, and I grabbed the knob to stop it, and I tried turning it. The knob had no effect, and it was
Wow.
just going from station to station to station.
Wow.
And I finally acknowledged, I thought of my father for whatever reason. I thought, oh, my goodness. And as soon as I said, oh, that's you, Dad, it stopped. And
So it's a
it
way of
never
coming through to
happened
you.
again.
Way
Yeah,
of coming through to you. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's, it was those kinds of things that really got me wondering. And so what I decided to do, because I had been working as a private investigator for years, I decided to use my skills as a private eye to start investigating the afterlife and see if there was more to it.
Wow. Wow, that's great. And how did you go about that? I mean, how do you go about being a private eye and a detective and very kind of left brain, analytical, critical thinking to this world of the right brain, receiving sensitivity, dead things? How do you get into that world? And what did your cohorts, what did your coworkers think of that? And your wife, Melissa, think of that?
Oh, well, Melissa was always very open to all of this stuff. So, where I was the skeptic, she was sort of the believer, if you might call it. Like, she never questioned any of it. And, of course, we had different upbringings, but and that was probably why. But, and other people, I just didn't really tell too many people about what I was doing. I sort of kept it to myself.
Because in those days, you really couldn't do that. I mean, those days, like when I was first coming out in this world, it's like no one really was around that you could talk to about life after death and communication and so forth.
That's right, and even the main books that we think of as sort of those foundation books, like You're Talking to Heaven, just wasn't even out yet, and so I didn't know what I was doing, and so I started going to psychics and tarot readers and astrologers. Nobody that I knew what a medium was yet, and most people didn't, and so for 2 years I was going searching, and I found, from my perspective, I found absolutely no evidence for 2 years. Until I finally, someone suggested a medium, and I said, what's a medium? And they told me. And then once I had a reading with a medium, I was able to gather evidence, evidential messages that the medium, who was a stranger to me, could not possibly know. And so it was from that point on, which was 1999, that I finally said, now I know which direction to go.
It's amazing. And the book is an incredible book, Answers About the Afterlife, Bob Olson. And it's really your journey and all the questions that you asked. And, I've been doing this work now 30 years. And all of the points that you make in this book, the questions that you ask in this book, every single person asks the exact same questions. What determines how and when we die? When does the spirit leave the body? How do we know when they're around us? The signs that they give. I mean, it's a pretty thorough book, I got to tell you. And I know it took you many years to write this book, yeah?
It did. I mean, first of all, I thought about it for years, but it took me 3.5 years to write it. But what was interesting is in the early years, like early 2000, 2001, 2002, I actually had time in my life where people could email me a question, because I would write about my experiences and I'd put them online, and people would find out about me and they'd write questions to me. And I would actually spend, an hour answering their question. And I would email it back to them. And then my answer then spawned like 2 or 3 more questions. Yeah. And so now they're emailing me back with new questions. And this is the way it would go. And so this would happen whether I was talking to people in conversation or what. It's like I give them an answer, and there was more questions that would follow because of my answer. And so after 15 years of this, I was able to write this book because I knew that every time I answered one question, I knew what the next questions would be in my head. So I always included those.
It's so thorough. It really is. I mean, like I said, it's the most thorough book I've read on this. And it's like an encyclopedia of the afterlife, of what happens. And a question I have for you, and everybody should definitely please read this book to educate yourself because it's really well done. A question I have, when did you start researching mediums and using mediums? I know you have the websites you have, which are really incredible research, incredible websites, Afterlife TV, Best Psychic Directory, Best Psychic Mediums. It's all on the internet. And you have a list of how many mediums would you say on your one page there, best or psychic mediums, I should say.
On bestpsychicmediums.com, I created that actually in 2002. I'd had another site that I was just writing about my favorite experiences. And, at that time when I was testing mediums for my own research. I was
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't doing it for the public. I was doing it for my own research. So I would meet a whole bunch of mediums, and I would test them in different ways to see what was possible and how they conflicted, and then how they did things the same. And I was very, very curious about why some things were different, some things were the same, and I would analyze things in that way. I would even take some of my case files as a private investigator that very few people knew, what was going on. But if there was someone who had died in relation to one of those cases, I would then use those cases to test the mediums and see what they could come up with. And I was amazed at how many details they knew about the case that nobody else knew about except me and a couple other people, you know.
Wow,
and
that's great.
So this is sort of how it started. By 2002, which was just a couple of years into it, I had tested a lot of mediums, and I was just writing about my favorite experiences and the best readings I was getting, and I knew there needed to be a place for it, and so that's how Best Psychic Mediums got started,
And when you're, I'm going to say testing, because you do test them, what is the criteria that you look for a medium that you would say, okay, this person is legitimate, this person really knows their stuff, and what do you look for when you're testing a medium for your site? It's really an important question.
Yeah, it is an important question, and it's interesting because obviously it's changed over the years. Because when I first started, I was a beginner, like anybody else, and I didn't know. But once you start getting a lot of readings from a lot of different mediums, now it's one of those things you can see, and you can see the difference. You can see who's good and who's not so good. And one of the things I recognize is there's some people who have a real great natural ability, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to give you great readings, but they certainly have a leg up on some of the other people. And then there are people who maybe don't have as great a natural ability, but they have been trained really well. And they've been trained by real credible teachers, other mediums who are teachers, and that training sometimes would make them better than the people who had the natural abilities without any training. And then the third thing that I noticed was people who had had a lot of experience. The experience really added to how good the reading was going to be as well. And then if you found somebody with all those things, great natural ability, a lot of experience, and good training, wow, you could really found a powerful reading, So when I was testing people, mainly I was looking for evidence, and I was looking to see how much evidence would come through. And I love, and this is just typical evidential mediumship, but when the medium starts giving you that kind of evidence, which is, they identify the person, even if it's just a first name, you usually know who it is. Sometimes you'll get both, but, and they give you dates around that person. So that, something happened in April. If they were born in April, you go, okay, now I think I know who that is. And then they tell you maybe what the person looked like, what their personality was like, how they died. And maybe what the career was while living, and they start telling you all these things, and you go, okay, now I know who this is. And then later in the reading, if they start to give you some more non-evidential messages, like I love you, and I'm proud of you, and I'm watching over you, and those types of messages, that's okay because they've already identified that person.
Right,
but
that's the message.
Yeah, which is great. But
it has to be that part of it.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just said that has to be part of the message, is to bring the upliftment of the person as well, of course.
Exactly. So I was looking for the people who give me the most compelling messages at the beginning. A lot of people count the hits and misses, right? This is a hit, this is a miss. And so many people focused on the misses. And they say, well, there was a lot of misses, so, they can't be real. And I didn't focus on the misses. I focused on the hits, and I focused on the hits that had the most compelling evidence. And if these were things that came from a stranger who knew nothing about me or my loved one, then how else did they get that information, right?
Right. I have a quick question for you. What's the difference when you're testing these people? Let's say, what's the difference between a psychic and a medium? Because many people blur the lines. And I know nowadays out there, it gets me a little upset because there are two very distinct differences. But what do you think as far as, and what do you think people calling psychic mediums? What's your take on all that? Because they're two different things, of course.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, a lot of people say psychic medium, and so I, in my book, Answers About the Afterlife, I still I still call it psychic medium, but I keep reminding everybody. But nowadays, people are just calling them a medium. You know what I mean?
Right.
But eventually that's just going to phase out, and you're either going to call them a medium or a psychic.
Well, because it's so very distinctively different. I mean, the psychic energy, you're dealing with the energy and kind of on a lower level in that, events, you can see the past, present, future, reading energy. But with a medium, you really are tapping into frequencies which are beyond the human's band. And that's really the difference, isn't it? The mediumship, the connection with spirit. It
is. And to me, you go to a psychic for information. To me, the way I think a psychic works best is that they can confirm information that we already know is true at our gut level, right? Our own intuition is telling us. They get to confirm that for us, which helps us to trust our own intuition, to trust our own inner wisdom. With a medium, they're communicating with spirit, and so a lot of us don't have that ability. We're all intuitive, but a lot of us haven't found a way to communicate with people in spirit, and that of course helps the people who are grieving and helps us learn about life after death in a way that is so profound and so sacred that I haven't really found any other way that does it the way a medium can do it during a reading.
Yeah, no, I agree. Of course, of course. And you find writing this book that you wrote that this was obviously your journey, and that did you find after you wrote this book that everything was solved for you? This was your journey. You answered the questions you wanted to, but are there more? Is there some more questions you want to answer now that you've written this book and it's pretty thorough? Anything left unsaid, do you think?
I feel like, when I was writing the book, I thought, I'm going to write this, and people can just pick the question they want, and then they can read that. And then I realized as I was writing it, oh, my God, there's a chronology to these, and people would be best to start from the beginning and read it all the way through, because you learn on levels, So when you get to the end, and I'm talking about, what happens to people who have taken their own life, if you don't understand the foundation of the earlier stuff, then that answer will be a little bit more difficult for you. And but for me personally, that's the way it kind of worked. Yeah, I learned the very basic stuff at the beginning, and then over the years, I would learn something new. My investigation went from mediums into other experiences. So I would have a past life regression, and I would
near-death experiences you write about really well as well.
Well,
past lives, reincarnation, you write about in the book. And it's so thorough, this book.
Well, I've interviewed so many people. I've had so many experiences, like past life regressions, like life between lives regressions. I've tried meditation. I've tried, spirit writing or inspired writing. I've tried to experience anything that I could, and things that I can't, like a near-death experience, I would then interview those people, including people who have had dream visitations or deathbed visions or shared death experiences. All these things are in there because if I couldn't experience it myself, I would talk to not just one, but lots of people who have had those experiences. And then I would give my conclusions based on, all those interviews that I did, not just one person's experience.
And you cover so many. How many questions would you say are in this book? Because the way you format the book, it's all questions that they're pretty general questions people ask me all the time. What's the difference between suicide and murder? What happens after a suicide? If I'm married to somebody, do I meet them in the afterlife, even though I've married somebody else in the physical world? It's so many. How many questions do you think did you answer in this book?
Well, there's 150 actual questions,
Wow.
And then what I realized was, there are questions within the questions, and or I should say there's questions that are answered within the questions. So certainly, it's a little bit exponential in that way, but there's 150 actual questions that are asked and then that I answer.
And very well. And let me ask you, is there a favorite part of the book for you? That's a tough one. I know it's your baby.
The second half of the book is my favorite because it starts to get into the more in-depth stuff. So when I start talking about suicide and murder and stuff like that, if you can understand my answers to those questions, and I hope you can because I spent so much time trying to articulate them.
No, you did a great job. For really anybody, and not just, and the thing what I love about it comes from a detective background, so there's an investigative type of background here. But it's not written by somebody who's in this work, who's a medium or a psychic or a healer. It's written by somebody kind of from the outside looking in with the background that you have. So you've crossed your T's and dotted your I's. And like I said, it's probably one of the best books I've ever read on life after death and spirit communication and soul journeys and conditions of life. And yeah, it's pretty good, I must say. I think it's going to be a part 2, Bob.
What's that?
I have a feeling there's going to be a part 2 here. There should be.
Probably will. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
There should be. Yeah. So it's a really great book. Everybody's called Answers About the Afterlife, Bob Olson. You can get on Amazon, right, Bud? It's on Amazon right now.
That's right. Amazon. It's on Barnes & Noble, but on Amazon you get the paperback or the Kindle. So a lot of people like the Kindle version.
And I would just love the callers. We have callers in the second segment. We'll talk to callers who might have some questions about the afterlife. How is that? Would you be willing to take some questions, Bob? And we can take it from your point of view and my point of view and answer them?
Oh, I would love to. Yeah. And if anybody's looking for the website, I'm sorry I didn't mention it. So you just use my name, BobOlson.com.
Yeah, Bob Olson. BOBOLSON.com. Bob Olson.
But I'd love to talk to people. That'd be great.
Yeah, and just see your perspective. There's a lot of people calling in about suicide, reincarnation, and that'd be great. What was the hardest part about writing this book?
The hardest part was that I had to, there's some, knowing that people would skip around, because, not everybody's going to read it. I knew that I was going to have to repeat some things. So some things would have to be repetitive, because if someone just read the answer about one question, I wanted to make sure they got the whole answer. And I didn't want to give half answers assuming they read something else. So the hard part was not being too repetitive, but also making sure to give the full answer and give it in such a way that people would understand it, not getting too ahead of anybody. You know what I mean? Like there's some pretty deep subjects here. And
well, one of the ones I love the question that you ask is when does death happen? When does the soul leave the body? And what do you think on that?
What do I think about that?
Yes. When does death happen? Because I know that's one of the questions you have in here. Or when does our spirit leave our body at death? That's the question.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I think the soul gets to choose. I actually think we even get to choose. But I have to make the discrepancy between death and dying. You know what I mean? So, death is when we actually leave our bodies. And for a lot of people, let's just say it's a tragic accident or whatever. So many, and I've heard this from people in spirit who communicated through mediums, or people who have had near-death experiences, even people who have had past lives and learned information about their death from there, that a lot of times we'll just leave our body long before the accident, before the plane crash, before the car crash, that sort of thing.
Do you think things are predestined, or do you think free will gets involved, or are there such things?
I think I talk a lot in the book about potentials. So I think there are certain things that are predestined. We know who our parents are going to be, probably know what our DNA is going to be like, what we'll look like, that sort of a thing. And then there are potentials where we're born with a certain potential, and it's our free will then that gets to choose which side of that potential is going to go. Like for me, I went through a period in my life where I had a deep depression, and I had suicidal ideation, they call it, deep thoughts, strong thoughts of taking my own life. And so I was born with the potential for suicide. Now, there's lots of people who would never consider that in their life, right? Never. It would never enter their mind. And I was the kind of person who had thoughts, a lot of thoughts over my life about taking my own life. So I was born with that potential. So we're born with a lot of potentials, and it's that our free will gets to choose which side of that potential we'll land on.
And those potentials, would you say, come from past life experiences as well?
I do. I think it's something that the soul wants to experience. And, so I think, we come into this lifetime, and it's like, the soul wants to experience either side of that. So like, so my soul wants to experience having those thoughts of taking my life and maybe not choosing it and living my life through. Or if I took my own life, I think from a soul perspective, even though there's great compassion there, my soul would be okay with that, because that would be an experience maybe it's never experienced before.
And it's all about experience here.
Or maybe it has, and it wants me to do it differently this time. There's just so many possibilities.
Right, and we come back with a lot of possibilities to act on, to live on. Very, very true.
Yeah.
So everyone, if you're callers, would you like to ask Bob a question about the afterlife? We're not going to be doing readings, but we're definitely going to talk to Bob more about the afterlife when we come back. So just call on in, and we will answer your question. We'll get through as many phone calls as we can. So we'll be right back. Stay for part 2.
Welcome to Talking to Spirit with your host, James Van Prague.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the second segment. We're having a wonderful conversation with Bob Olson, a private investigator of the afterlife, and talking about his new book, Answers About the Afterlife, which I think everybody should read. It should be the Bible for everyone. So many questions answered. And Bob has agreed to give callers a book. Everyone that we go to on the phones, he will give a book to you, which is nice. So just stay online, and when the producer's there, we'll get your number. So call in if you have questions for Bob. The first question we're going to go to, we have line 8, which is Cindy from Canada. Hi, Cindy.
Hi, James. Hi.
How are you doing?
Fine. How are you?
Good. I thought your question was very intriguing. So would you like to give it to Bob?
Yeah. Ever since my daughter was small, around 3 or 4, she would start saying, like, if we were sitting on the couch and just kind of watching TV or something, she'd ask me, Mommy, are we safe and sound? And that's not how I usually talk, so I really figure out, like, where she was getting that from. So it just always kind of intrigued me, and she used to say that quite a bit.
So probably having visions or connection with spirit, yeah?
Yeah.
And Bob, do you find that often that children have visions of spirit in your work? Did you find that?
They do. I mean, a couple of things come to mind there. Either she's having visions of spirit, and kids just seem to be able to do it much better than adults.
Mm-hmm.
Some people think it's because they haven't been away from the spirit world very long.
It's very true.
Others think that it's just because they haven't learned skepticism from the adults, and eventually we do. If we live, say, within a family or a community that has that kind of skepticism, they sort of talk us out of it, and we learn to push those visions aside. The other possibility is that she had a lifetime where something happened, where she wasn't safe, and something happened, and she's having past memories of that past life. She's had memories of that past life, and that's very common as well. So,
that is.
Again, usually these things always tend to go away over time, but it's great. It's just wonderful if you have a conversation with them to ask them more questions about it, and then you can reassure them, of those any fear that she might be having. But I would look at it both sides. Is she seeing people in spirit that maybe is making her feel a little uneasy, or is it maybe a past life memory and something bad happened to her in a past life that she's still remembering? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Another thing I just want to bring up is with all the reality TV shows, I wish somebody would come up with a show that about past life regression and actually doing like regressions on TV.
It would be great. Is there one, Bob?
Actually, right now, yeah, there's one right now. What's it called?
I know what you're going to say. It's the one about the children, right?
No, it's.
No?
I think it's called Regression Past Lives or something. It's actually they actually show people having a past life regression. Then the guy goes and it's on Lifetime Family. It's on Lifetime.
Okay. Just Google regression TV, you'll find, I'm sure.
Yeah, and so he gives a regression, and then he researches the information he got, and then they get back together, and he shows them like birth certificates or pictures or maps or whatever in relation to what they got. It's a good show.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks, Cindy. We're going to give you a book, so hang on the line, okay?
Okay, thank you so much.
All right. Hey, Bob, I'm just going to open your book to any page and see what question you have here. Okay. Oh, this is a very interesting one. All right. You have here, what happens to soldiers who kill others in war?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's an
amazing.
It's an amazing question. I actually was almost done with the book, and I got this question in by email from somebody, and I thought, oh, I didn't answer that one, so I added that to the book. Being a soldier is a very unique experience, and again, to me, it's all about our souls choose to have a lifetime as a human in physical body for a reason, and we're here to experience many different experiences. Well, having an experience as a soldier is a unique experience that you can't have really in any other way, and you certainly can't have that in the spirit world. So, to me, there's a lot of reasons why soldiers kill, and some are being ordered to be killed. Some kill out of fear of being killed by the other person. Some, unfortunately, kill innocent people, we'll say. because they're overwhelmed and stressed out, and they're not thinking rationally because of the pressures of war. There's lots of different reasons. But to me, I kind of associate this experience with the experience that someone might have if they accidentally killed somebody by accident. We'll say, I had a nephew who died when he was 5 years old, and he was hit by a car. And, and the reason is there's not as much culpability as if someone, thought about murdering someone because they wanted to steal their money and then went and killed that person. It's just a different experience when you're doing it in wartime. So I think what happens is the person who passes, who was that soldier who killed someone in war, is going to see it from that perspective, and they're going to recognize that there were reasons that they did it, and they came into this lifetime knowing that they probably would end up in this situation. A lot of people who were soldiers, they had fathers and grandfathers or other relatives who were in war, and that's all happens for a reason, to sort of lead us in a direction. But I think what happens with those soldiers is that they can be much more forgiving, and that's part of the experience is learning to forgive themselves for any lives that they took. But it's most people always get there, and of course they have spirits around them who are helping them to get there.
Well, I've had a lot of spirit come through who were soldiers that come through to me, and I've had different experiences. But one was I came back to go into war to do this, and as an honor to my country, and they were in that space, And and they said if I come back again, I would probably do the same thing again because that's what I know. That's what my soul knows what to do at the level that they're at. That's what they feel they have to do. And then I've had other people come through, other soldiers would come through and say, I've learned that I shouldn't do that this time. But I know when I was, this will go back to past life regression. When I was regressed once, I just asked the question, why am I a medium and why am I internationally known and why, millions of people know me? Why is that? And why did I choose that to be a medium, to be on the front line here? And it was interesting because I saw a vision of myself with my mustache, and I was a general in all these different wars, and my face remained the same, but all the uniforms changed. And I realized in every single war that I was responsible for telling my men when to go in and kill people.
Yeah.
And that I, of course, responsible for many, many lives that passed. And then I came back in this lifetime to heal millions of people's lives about death.
That's right. I mean, that makes perfect sense to me, James, because that's kind of what we're doing now. The way I always would explain it is it's the same thing, but I would say it a little differently in that, you wanted to experience both sides of that situation. So in one side, you're a general, telling people to kill, and another, you're a medium helping people who have dealt with those losses. And so you're experiencing death and killing from different sides. So that eventually we experience from all different sides. Like if you want to use, like murder as an example, in one life one could be a murderer, in another life they could be the person who was murdered.
Right.
In another life they could be a family member of someone who was a murderer. In another one they could be a family member of someone who was murdered. We experience
learning all the different aspects of it.
All different aspects, so that we come to have compassion and love and understanding. More as a whole, more as a soul would.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
We have line 2. We have Martha's calling in for you, Bob. So we'll go to line 2 with Martha from Norwalk,
Martha.
Connecticut. Malta is her name? Okay. Hello, darling.
Hello.
Is it Mozita? How do you pronounce your name?
Maritza.
Maritza. Hi, Maritza.
Maritza.
How are you, James? I'm so happy you took my call. I met you in Richfield, Connecticut, and I was so delightful by you, by the program.
Oh, thank you, sweetheart.
My question is that I have two loved ones dying recently. One was my mother 4 years ago, and the other one was my girlfriend a year ago. And how long it takes to reincarnate, and if it's this afterlife, is it process too?
Oh, good question.
How that works? I mean, I'm just kind of curious because my niece. My sister swears that my niece is my mother. I don't know, but
okay, that's a good question, Maritza. Good question, Bob. What do you think about that? How long does it take to reincarnate?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting question because time doesn't exist in the spirit world, right? So,
right.
I make an explanation early in the book that it takes some time, but I can only do it briefly here. That there's a difference between the soul and the spirit, and the soul is our whole self, our higher self. that always stays in the spirit world, and part of that soul comes to experience a human life, and that's what we call our spirit. Okay, so the spirit of Bob, me, when I pass, I will go into the afterlife, and the spirit of Bob will always exist in the afterlife. That part of my soul that is Bob,
it's part of your soul,
stay there, and it won't. It's not Bob, the spirit of Bob, that is going to reincarnate. It's actually my soul that is going to have another lifetime, and it might have a lifetime as George, and so that now if I were to have a past life regression, I could perhaps, we'll say George, if he came after me, again, it doesn't matter in the spirit world, but if for our chronological linear time thinking, we go, George has a past life regression. He might experience my lifetime. He might go back and have a past life as me, recognizing, but it's his soul. It's the soul that's having all these different lifetimes. So what can happen is we can reincarnate. There's no timetable to it.
There's no time element per se.
Very quickly from one life to the next, because our spirit is not what's reincarnated. It's our soul that's reincarnating. But this also explains why Marita can, when she passes, her mother will always be there for her. Her mother is not going to go into another lifetime and then not be there when Marita passes, because her mother will still be there as that spirit that is going to remain in the spirit world as her mother.
As part of that soul family. They're all the same soul.
Family.
Yeah.
And then her mother's soul can reincarnate, but her mother will always be there for her. And a lot of times people ask that question because they're worried their loved ones won't be there for them when they cross over.
And there are aspects of the soul that can come back earlier, too. So there might be some recognition in another family member, a newborn, even animals, too. They say, oh, that's my mother's a cat. There are aspects of that soul, don't you think, Bob, that they can just come into the incarnation?
Totally. And the great thing, if we understand everything's happening at the same time, now that's a weird thing to think as human beings, but they say everything's happening at the same time. So it really, this sort of timetable thing doesn't really matter to the soul, because it's all happening at the same time.
So, Maritza, I hope that answers your question. We have a lot more calls. Stay on the line, Maritza, okay, sweetheart? We'll give you a book.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Love you, honey. Maritza. See you soon. Okay, we have line 8, and we have, I think it's Elite. Oh, wow, from Arizona. Hello there.
Hi.
Hi, how do you pronounce your name?
It's Elite. Let me just quickly say, I know you want to answer my question, but thank you to both of you guys for all the work that you do.
Oh, thanks, Elite. Thank you.
Thanks, Elite. Thanks so much.
So my question was, I'm going to try to simplify it. Here in the physical world, let's say we're here and there are a number from 1 to 10 elevation. Okay, I'm really simplifying it, obviously.
Right.
And when we die, let's say we got to number 3. When we die, are we at number 3? And is there an opportunity to continue to learn? And, I'm looking for a straight answer. You don't have to sugarcoat anything. The reason I'm asking is someone passed in my life, and I've been to mediums, and it seems like they haven't been growing, and that's not a judgment. It's almost like all their responses are from 20 years ago.
Okay, good question. Very good question. Let's see what Bob says.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because a lot of people talk about these levels in the spirit world. In one question by saying, yes, in the spirit world we continue to grow, and kind of a funny question. I mean, I think Elite will laugh at it too, because it's kind of like saying, do we grow spiritually in the spirit world? Is like saying, do we grow physically when we go to the gym? You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, that's where we grow, even more here, because we have eternal lives, our lives are eternal in the spirit world. But we come and have a human lifetime because it's that sort of, no pain, no gain. We grow very quickly as spiritually when we have a human lifetime, and I think that's why
grow quicker here.
Keep doing it. As far as worrying about whether someone's going to grow, first of all, it doesn't matter when you're in the spirit world. It doesn't matter. It's not about that. It's not. Nobody's judging one another, and I can tell that you get that, Elite. Nobody's judging one another as to what level or where they're at in their spiritual growth. But yeah, no matter what, we always will grow.
Bob?
What's that?
personally, it's a pleasure to be in this physical world and grow. And so I'm just wondering if that happens in the spirit world as well.
It does. Yeah, it does.
Very much
And
so. You can grow over there.
You can grow over there. And, I had a life between lives regression where I went and learned that, one of the things I do in the spirit world is teach about fear, because we don't know fear there, And so I'm growing because I'm teaching about fear, and then the people who are learning about fear from me are growing because of what they're learning. And we can grow, we can learn things there in a much better way than we can learn here. Like someone can basically hop into my energy and experience what I learned about fear, there. We certainly can't do that here, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Wish we could. Thank
right,
you, Lee.
that would be neat.
Well, thank you, sweetheart. Appreciate the
thanks,
call.
Lee,
It's a
so
great
much.
call, Lee.
Thank you both so much.
Okay, sweetheart. Stand in line. We'll give you a book. Okay, great. Hello? All right.
All right.
Okay, good. Well, good. Very good. Very, very good. Some people are asking a question about what is the process? Like, when they, and I've been asked this too, Bob. What is the process of when a soul leaves the body at the time of death? Is it easier for some souls or harder for some souls? What do you think from your research?
Yeah, I do think, I don't know if I'd say easy or hard, but it's a natural process for all of us. We've done it so many times, and because we've had so many other lifetimes, so we've done it so many times. It's more of a remembering type of thing. But it depends on how much you know about the afterlife. One of the reasons that I do what I do, and I get so passionate when I talk about it, is because it's about waking up to the process, so that when you cross over, maybe it won't be a shock to you. Now, I know people who are atheists who have had near-death experiences, and they still weren't shocked. You know what I mean? It was okay. They were like, oh, yeah. But there are others who sort of, got a little bit more stuck in their beliefs, and so they did feel like, oh, wow, I was wrong. And they didn't really know how to navigate. They had to kind of feel their way and remember how to navigate the spirit world again, recognizing that, all we have to do is think about what we want, and we're there,
Right. It's a soul memory, of course. The soul memory comes back. And you find a lot of people, you find a lot of people when they pass to the other side, they live the mental images or belief systems that they have as far as religions or what they think that will greet them when they pass over, or is everything completely free of that?
No, what I've recognized, and certainly with people who've had near-death experiences, a lot of people talk about they had a hellish experience, a negative near-death experience, and I, having researched a lot of them, my belief on it is that it was because of their beliefs that they were going to hell, and they experienced what they expected to get. Now that would have changed. That would have changed with time. The moment they changed their frame of mind, or even if they called out for help. Calling out for help is like thinking of another alternative, right?
It's acknowledging. It's acknowledging.
If I call for help, there might be help. As soon as you change your mind in that way, that's a new belief, and that changes your surroundings. So over time, nobody is ever stuck in that place. It's just a matter of if you do get what you believe and we get what we expect in the initial stages of crossing over. And, and so a lot of people, they think, they experience maybe the same thing that we experience in the physical life here, because that's all we know and that's what we're expecting there. Then we eventually learn, we're beings of light, and and the light that is surrounding us is what you might call God or the universe or source. And so then you kind of remember it all, and it all comes back to you.
Now, and another question here we have from Robin line 2. I'm just going to go because we have only 5 minutes, but I want to ask you, about lucid dreaming. And what do you think, Bob, from your research, what is dreaming?
I think it can be two things. I think one, it could just be the brain working on our fears and our thoughts and working out problems. And then on the other side, I think it's our subconscious mind connecting with the spiritual realm. And I think that in some ways we're experiencing other lifetimes that are going on at the exact same moment. And I think sometimes we're just, which is another way of saying we're experiencing past lives or even future lives. And sometimes we're just getting information from loved ones in spirit.
And do you find that a lot of people have connections within the dream state, that they meet their loved ones in the spirit world, that they go to the other side and have connections with them? Because I have found it in my work. I don't know if you found it in yours.
I have.
Yeah, very common, yes?
Very common that our loved ones meet us there, because it's so easy for them to do it. and it's called a dream visitation. And it's that dream that's so clear and vivid, you remember it like it happened yesterday, even if it was 20, 30 years later.
And why do some spirits come through with electricity really well? Others come through with smells. Others come through in other ways. What's the differential? Why do they come through? Some come through with electricity, come through with songs. Others come through with butterflies. What do you find in your research? Why do they come through in different ways?
I feel it all has to do with what's going to resonate with me the most, you know. I can't remember my dreams at all. Like, I'm not a big dreamer, and maybe it's because of the way I sleep. Maybe I don't sleep very well.
No, I'm just saying, like, just generally speaking, like when the spirits come through with signs for somebody, like let's say, like your father had the radio thing went crazy, and somebody had flashing lights, and somebody their computers go crazy. And that's one spirit or two spirits doing that, but then another spirit won't be able to do that, but they're able to come through with smells or, you know, perfume smells, tobacco smells.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
What's the distinction between them? Why do some come through with electricity and others come through with smells?
Well, I think just like all of us, you know, we have certain skills that when we're here on the physical plane, we're in the spiritual plane, we have certain abilities, you know, that are better than others. And so some might be able to do that. But regardless, it also might have to do with who you're trying to communicate with. So the smell, or in my case, the radio, might wake me up, whereas, you know, some other sign that my father might have sent me, I just didn't even notice it. So I think it can be a combination of their skills and what might attract our attention.
Very good. Very good. You answered that perfectly, Bob. I agree with that 100%.
Thank you, James. Great. I love that.
That's great. That's great. What's in the next lineup for you, for your future? What do you want to do next? And I know you have all these websites, and you're really bringing a lot of light to the planet and introducing people to mediumship and life after death. What's your next plan?
You know,
in this lifetime.
I want to do a lot more Afterlife TV shows. You know, they can find that on afterlifetv.com.
Yeah, they're fabulous. They're wonderful.
I want to do more of that. I'm finding that my investigation continues because there's always something new. So I don't get bored at all. There's always something new. I just heard the other day about a new way that people are getting in contact with their loved ones in spirit through a process sort of related to EMDR. And it's a little EMDR tweaked a little bit. Oh, my goodness. I can't wait to interview the person who sort of stumbled upon it.
And what is EMDR, Bob? What is EMDR?
EMDR is where you think of, they work with people who have PTSD, for instance, any kind of trauma. And you think of that while someone is almost waving their finger or waving a stick so that your eyes are going back and forth very rapidly. And it mimics in the brain REM sleep. And some people, the trauma, that shuts that part of the brain down so that they're not able to work through trauma that has occurred in their brain. And this helps them to light that part of the brain back up and work through that trauma. And what's happened is there's a guy named Dr. Botkin who he recognized that just at the end, if he did a couple extras of these things at the end, these rapid eye movement things, the people closed their eyes and all of a sudden loved ones would appear from the spirit world.
I've heard about this. I've just heard about it like 2 weeks ago. Yes.
Isn't it fascinating? So
it's fascinating. Another new way in. Yep.
So I'm never going to stop doing what I'm doing.
Well, Bob, thank you very much for joining us today. Answers About the Afterlife is the book. Bob Olson and BobOlson.com. If you want to go check out more Bob, you should. Bob is an incredible teacher, investigator, and comes from integrity and really knows his stuff. So, Bob, thank you. Anything else you want to let people know?
No, it was so. I'm so honored to be here, and it was so enjoyable to be with you. And I'm happy to call you a friend, James. And just
thank you, Bob.
Thanks so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. So, everyone, please go to Amazon if you want to get Bob's book, and we'll bring the numbers. I'll get those numbers going. And I just want everyone to know I'm going to be at the I Can Do It conference in Vancouver, and that's next weekend. Looking forward to seeing everybody there who can make it there. And I'm doing a cruise to Alaska, and with Mavis Batilla. She's a lady that was in Harry Potter. Maggie Smith played her in Harry Potter. So we're going to be doing readings on that cruise also, if you're interested. So please go to my website, www.vanprog.com. And until then, may the love and light of the spirit world surround you always. Thank you, everyone.